everybody. Hi, it's Becky from Power Tools with Thread. We are about to start the Fa La La tree quilt sew along, and I'm gonna do, I don't know, a little bit every day in a video, and today we're just gonna talk about prepping your fabric and cutting your fabric and being able to read a pattern. Now, there are a lot of pattern companies that use an alphabet type system, and that is not the way Villa Rosa Designs does their patterns. And by alphabet system I mean that when they give you a pattern, this is a free pattern from Shabby Fabrics, this is a very intricate quilt and they will have a list of fabric A, fabric B, fabric C, that type of thing. And inside of that they will want you to cut various pieces, of course, in order to make up this great big pattern layout. Well, one of the easiest ways I have ever found for me to keep pattern pieces straight, because sometimes it's very difficult to tell the difference between a 3 7/8 and a 4 1/4 inch piece, or a 3 7/8 and a 3 1/2 inch piece. It's just, you know, after a while they all start to look the same. And so one of the things that I like to do is on the back of this pattern, for instance, it'll say from 6 fat quarters cut, and it will want you to cut one of all 6 fat quarters of a certain size. And for that first dimension, I consider that to be fabric A. And what I like to do is make a copy of the pattern and then go through, and where it says cut whatever, however many of a size, I label that with an A. And I've blacked out all the measurements so that I don't give away the pattern for those who haven't purchased it. But for those of you that have purchased it, take a look at the back of your card, or if you have done the digital download, and it says from 6 fat quarters cut, and it wants you to cut a certain amount, a certain size, a certain amount, a certain size, a certain amount, a certain size. And by amount, I mean the number of pieces that you are to cut. That swath that many times. I hope that's not confusing. So where it says from 6 fat quarters cut 1, you're going to have 6 pieces. From 6 fat quarters cut 4, you're going to have 24 pieces. Does that make sense? So that's what you're going to do. Now what I do is on each one of those, on my paper copy, is I go through and label each one of those A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And there is a wonderful little product, and they are called Alpha Bitties. You get them at the Fat Quarter Shop. You can get them on Amazon and everything. I'll link to all this below. And an Alpha Bitty is just it's a hard plastic little double-sided printed alphabet piece. That's all it is. And from the corresponding letters that I put on my pattern pieces, I will put those on my cut pieces. And this is where I use the project boards quite a bit. This helps to keep me straight. So here is 6 of fabric A, here is 24 of fabric B, and 24 of fabric C. Okay? And likewise, from the other 2 fat quarters, it says to cut 2. So 2 of 2 fat quarters, there's 4 here of fabric D, and there is 4 here of fabric E, and there is 8 here of fabric F. So that's how I keep myself straight. I'm about ready to start cutting the ornaments, and I will put those and whatnot in the background. I go through every single bit on the pattern, and I'd hold it up and show you closer, but I can't give away the measurements or the quantities or any of that kind of thing. So just take a look at your pattern. It may make it easier for you. You know, otherwise just, you know, cut them the way whatever's easiest for you. For me, once I label mine A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and however many there are with all of my alphabetties, then I put them on my project boards, and then I go through and make sure where it says sew, I also label those out. And that way with the alphabet, and then I know to grab one of these and one of these and put them together or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I hope so. This is hard to do. I see why Pat Sloan now just does a whole row and says, here, go do this. I don't do that. I can't do just a row and put that all together. I have to cut all of my pieces at one time, and then I have to, all of the pieces, like for instance, all of the ornament pieces are requiring piecing. And so I have to do all 8 of the ornaments all at one time. And I just get those all done and create a single unit of that piece of the ornament and the little corners that snowballed it. So that's how my brain works when I do these quilts. And it's very efficient for me to do that. For some people it's not, but for me it is. And so where you have a quilt pattern that will, and this is a real good example on this Shabby Fabrics pattern right here. This is not the Villa Rosa Designs pattern. This is the one from Shabby Fabrics. And they'll tell you, take piece C and piece I and put them together and then subcut them into these pieces. And you get a CI unit, just like this. And then put them together and you have a 4-patch, like that. Or they want you to take fabric A, fabric D, put them together and get a half square triangle of A and D. So this is the way I learned to do quilt patterns. And for those patterns that I get, like Villa Rosa Designs, that do not use A, B, C, and D, and that's to give you leeway for you to use the fabrics that you want to use and put them together the way you want. It's to give you that freedom to be able to do that. I don't do well with freedom. I like structure in my life. This is the way that makes the most sense to me to be able to put patterns together. So I'm going to show you how I do my pressing. I will show you how I do my cutting and putting everything together here. And that's it for today. So it's going to be pretty quick and simple. So today you need to prep your fabrics and get them cut and label them if you so desire. Oh, also, if you don't have alphabetties, don't worry about it. I have several sets because inevitably I've lost, an L or a P or something somewhere along the way. But if you don't have these, just use a little, like a Post-it note and, put it on the fabric, stick it to it or pin it to it or whatever you need. There's no reason to go out and spend that kind of money for that. So, all right, you guys, I hope you enjoy the rest of this video and we will see you tomorrow when we start stitching. One of the first things you want to do to all of your fat quarters is to press them. And the way I do that is to take either water in a spray bottle, or I have one of these very handy Quilters Corner misters. I just absolutely love this thing. I'll put a link to it below. And I use Mary Ellen's Best Press in here. I buy it by the gallon, and I will usually put like 2 tablespoons of water in here and the rest Mary Ellen's Best Press. It makes it smell real nice, and it puts a nice crisp finish on your fabric. You want to make sure to get all your wrinkles out and whatnot, and I do not use steam. I also prefer to iron on the back side of the fabric. So like you can see, this is a print. This has been printed onto this fabric. So there's actually a layer of print on top of the fibers. To get directly to the fibers, you're better to go to the back. And I just do a fine all over mist and then take a dry iron and start in the middle and just work my way out. And this will help to make sure that you set the weave of the fabric. It's not going to ripple and bubble as you cut, and it will get all of the wrinkles and creases out that might have come from the manufacturer or from the quilt store when they folded your fat quarters. So you want to do this to all of your fat quarters and all of your fabric really, but for the fat quarters right now that we're going to use for the tree and the ornaments. Here are all 8 of my fat quarters, and you always want to start with a brand new blade in your rotary cutter, and this is the 45 millimeter. I use predominantly 3 rulers when I cut fabric. This is a 24-inch Omni Grip, and it has a 1/2 inch on one side, which makes it very easy to cut 2.5 inch strips or 3.5 inch strips. But I use this all the time to cut big long lengths. And then I have a smaller Omni Grip that I use to cut smaller pieces such as squares. And then I have a little 2.5 inch ruler that I use all the time for cutting even smaller parts. So the first thing I like to do is I just even up all of my fat quarters on the selvage edge, and it doesn't matter where that it is actually on my mat. You'll be able to see that a fat quarter is not a fat quarter is not a fat quarter. They're all different shapes and sizes and lengths, and it just depends on who was cutting it and how generous they were or not, and if their mat and everything like that. So the one standard size that you can actually count on a fat quarter is the selvage edge. And so I line up all of my selvage edges, and then I come in like an inch from the selvage edge, maybe 1.25 inches, and I just cut them all off. And I just try to make sure that the selvage edge is fairly even with one line. Doesn't matter which line, but it's fairly even with one line on my mat to make sure that I'm going to get somewhat of a 90-degree cut. And then just a little bit outside of that selvage edge, again, I line it up to be about 1 inch, and I will make the cut. This is all 8 at one time, and I have a brand new blade. Now when I cut, I start behind the fabric. You don't ever want to cut toward you. You run the risk of pulling it off accidentally and cutting yourself. You always want to start behind it, not right at it, but a little bit behind it, and get rolling. I hold my hand on my ruler in an open hand like this. I hold it about in the middle. You'll see me move my hand. I go here, I stop, I go here and finish it out, just to keep the ruler from wiggling around. Okay, so here are all of my selvages, and now I know I have a straight line cut right here. That's how I do that. Okay, so from the first 6 fat quarters that we are to cut, we're to cut 1 of fabric A. It's not labeled as A on the pattern. That is something that I do to keep me straight. And 1 of 6 fat quarters gives us 6 pieces of fabric A. We are to cut 4 of 6 fat quarters of size B, so that's 24 pieces of B. And we are to cut 4 of cut size C. So I have my A, B, and C. So we'll have 6 here, 24 here, and 24 here. So now I'm going to take this project board and put it over out of the way so I can cut my other ones. This is the beauty of using project boards. Okay, I was editing this video, and I'm going to do a little add-in right here. I don't think that I was very clear in explaining my method behind my madness on how I cut my fabric. What I do is take the very first cut off of whatever it is, whether it's yardage or it's a fat quarter, and I cut it at the widest possible cut. Let's say we've got to have multiple cuts of the same fabric. So I take the widest cut, I get the size that I need, and then I will trim it down and trim it down and trim it down till I get everything that I need out of that particular cut of fabric. You know, a lot of times a pattern will call for like, oh, I don't know, 196 2.5 inch squares. Then you cut a whole bunch of 2.5 inch strips and just go to it from there. But the way I did it for this one, where we only need 3 sizes out of the same fabrics. And so I'm going to do a real quick example where I hope this is a lot clearer because I didn't get into it. Okay, let's say from this strip, I need squares that are 5 7/8, squares that are 3 1/4, and squares that are 2 1/2. So what I will do is I will cut the entire first strip at 5 7/8. I don't cut a little chunk out of a corner. That to me is, it's so easy to cut too far, and now you've got a piece that doesn't work, and I just, that makes me crazy to cut like that. So I cut the whole first strip at 5 7/8. So let's say I need squares at 5 7/8. I'm going to put this here so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I need 5 7/8 squares. I'm going to go here. This strip is 5 7/8 wide, so I'm going to cut 5 7/8. Here's my squares. Okay, so there's my first set. My next ones need to be 3 1/4. So I will go ahead and cut 3 1/4 here, and then I will turn it, get it straight on the line, and cut it 3 1/4 here. These are good sized scraps to use for applique. All right, so now there's 2 of them cut, and now I need a 2 1/2 inch strip. And let's pretend all of these are 2 1/2 inches. And so then I will just trim this, and I need 8 of these. Okay, so then I will turn this way, and I will do 2 1/2 by 2 1/2. Another way, another very efficient way to cut small fabric pieces like this. All right, let me do these. All right, so here I've got 5 7/8 squares, and I need 2 1/2 inch squares out of these. I will cut a 2 1/2 inch strip. A very, very efficient and very accurate way to cut now is to use the lines on the mat instead of using the measurements on the ruler. So if this is sitting here, I'm going to come over and measure 1 2 1/2. And what I do, let me get this right over this so you can see how I do this. So what I do is, now I'm measuring from over here, and I'm going to go backwards. So all my fabric is on this line, and I'm going to measure over 2 1/2. 1 2 1/2, and I make sure that the 1/2 inch mark is level here. You want to get, like, I'm going to put the line for the 9 on this, and the 1/2 inch mark is on here. I'm looking at the red line underneath the OmniGrip ruler, and I'm also going to look here. So I'm making sure the red line is level with the top of the fabric. I'm making sure the 1/2 inch line is on top of the red line under there. And now I'm looking here and making sure that these dots here are also level with this line of the fabric. That's how I know I have a 2 1/2 inch square right here. I'm going to trim this, move it away, and then pick up the ruler and slide it a little bit without sliding the fabric, and move over again another 1/2, 1 2. Again, making sure that everything is lined up and nothing's cattywampus. We don't want that. And trim that. If I have to trim a whole bunch, of fabric at one time, I'll go that way and move the ruler backwards. And if you took the Cut To It class on Craftsy, she gives you all kinds of measurements where you can move your ruler back, and all of that. So I hope that helps to straighten things up. I apologize for not being clear in the beginning of the video. I was going to go back and cut a bunch of it out, but I also said a lot of things I wanted to communicate. I hope that's not confusing. You guys, I'm not your average bear when it comes to quilting, and I've never had a professional quilting class, as you can obviously see. I've only taken classes on Craftsy, and I'm pretty much all self-taught, but I try to glean the most that I can from everybody and, you know, do things as most efficiently as possible. So, all right, that's it for today, and we will see you tomorrow when we get to sewing. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.